So, welcome to our webinar today, where we are going to be looking at walking the digital corridors, really around looking at how to use this to expand your lead generation and also build some of those communities. Our speaker today is Alex Abbott. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure.
Alex, you describe yourself on LinkedIn as the MarTech growth guy, and I can't wait to hear more of that. But you're the founder of Supero, and I've been working with you myself personally on generating more leads around my LinkedIn accounts, and you're going to be sharing some more information there. And you know, I know that I always used to look at how I was going to dress myself to go to face-to-face events and how I'd be presented there. But you've been teaching me about how I really need to think about how I look on social and my street cred on all of those channels. So I'm going to hand over to you because I can't wait to see what you're going to share with the audience today. Alex, I will let you screen share and then come back to you for Q&A at the end.
Brilliant. Thank you for having me, Lisa. So I'm going to start with a short kind of background, but essentially from my perspective, B2B sales and marketing has changed forever. So if we look at research that was done, 10 years ago, the corporate executive board found that almost 60% of the purchase decision had concluded by the time a buyer decided to speak with a supplier. So if we look at that updated research, this time by Forrester, they found that as much as 90% of the purchase decision is concluded by the time the buyer chooses to invite the supplier or seller into pitch. And if we look at that same piece of research from Forrester, they have found that the amount of time that is afforded to the supplier within that cycle, within that purchase cycle, has dropped to 17%. And if you're one of 3 or one of 4 suppliers on the shortlist, you're getting as little as 5 or 6% of the total time available to influence the purchase decision, which just simply isn't enough. And so more and more people, buyers, are turning to online, social media, peers, friends, colleagues to inform their shortlist of suppliers by the time they even speak to anyone. Then the complexity. So, 10 years ago, there was something like 5 or 6 stakeholders influencing the purchase decision. And so you had to, do your work to tailor your approach. And if you could, speak to each of those stakeholders to influence their purchase decision towards the solution that you're providing. Today, that's more like 12, depending on the segment in which you're selling. Certainly mid-market and enterprise, it's closer to 12 stakeholders that are influencing the purchase decision. And not only that, but with the economic headwinds that we're faced with and the cost of living crisis, the scrutiny that's put under the kind of this purchase decision is making it harder to sell and harder for buyers to buy. And who wants to speak to a seller? Gartner have found that 83% of buyers prefer a rep-free experience. And the reason that is because less than a quarter of buyers are making quality decisions on the solution that they choose to buy. So 3/4 of buyers are making what they deem to be poor quality decisions as a result of the experience they've got from sellers. However, in the same research, 79% of buyers have said that they want to speak to a human being. They want the ability to ask questions. And so, this isn't necessarily the death of the salesperson, but I think it's more a question of salespeople, sales teams, people selling to other organizations need to be seen as information providers, guiding buyers through the complex purchase process. And so with all these things in mind, in my opinion, this is making the traditional B2B sales and marketing funnel obsolete. No longer can we throw more money in the top of the funnel and expect more to come out the bottom. We have to change our approach. We need to empower our people, ourselves, to become micro influencers, take ownership of our personal brands and stand out and look different. We need to be connecting with our audiences on a daily basis and activating our networks by creating content that, yes, it makes us look different, but it demonstrates that we're an expert in our field, as well as helping our audience get to know us at scale. So being more human and a bit more personal. We know buyers turn to safe places to ask questions and share knowledge. It's no different on social media. We're finding that people are turning more to social media as a search engine than they are Google. And they are speaking to peers and ex-colleagues, and quite often they're connecting with them via social. Social isn't going away. There's 4.6 billion social media users around the world, more than 90% of the world's internet population. It's growing quarter over quarter, year over year. We're spending more time on social media. And so, I think that going into 2023, the number one skill that we should be hiring for is the ability to walk digital corridors effectively. The challenge is it's not the easiest thing to do. You need to be brave enough. You need to be confident enough. And you also need to navigate that fine line between that personal branding and selling. Because the minute you start selling, that's the moment you push your audience into the zone of resistance. So Sapiro have created a range of services across 4 pillars that we're calling the 4 pillars for growth. The first one is around value creation. So how do we help our clients create a story that's more emotive, that talks to the emotional side of the brain, to activate the desire to make a change? What is that path to value? And helping to design those steps on that path to value for clients. So for clients winning other customers, what's that visible, seamless journey to realizing the impact and the value that you provide? What are the value acceleration levers? So how do you then link that value to capabilities that you provide, whether services or technology? And how do you link use cases to those capabilities to make it easy to understand the value that you deliver? The second pillar, from an enablement perspective, how do we then translate that value creation approach into the application of it? And so how do you then teach your people to tailor the messaging, tailor the approach to help the buyer navigate that complex buying process, building consensus with their peers to gain support, for example. And then secondly, from an enablement perspective, just as we've been talking about walking those digital corridors, we provide training, coaching, and mentoring to our clients to help them develop their personal brand, activate their network, and create content consistently. And then from a talent acquisition perspective, we focus quite heavily on the qualification of the candidate. So how do you qualify candidates effectively? By providing a scorecard. So, we assess profiles, their digital profiles, provide our clients with a scorecard, design a set of questions that draws out evidence of where they've done this kind of activity before, test their bravery for this kind of activity, and then prepare a report to recommend the right candidates. And then finally, building community. So there's 2 sides to this. So yes, it's building the community. What's the strategy? what's the recruitment, member recruitment plan, content plan, the overall management. But then just as important, what's the engagement approach? So how can we then train people within our client's organization to walk digital community corridors effectively and safely, selling without selling? So everything has changed from my perspective, accelerated by the pandemic. These guys you might be familiar with. So for me, what these guys did for Top Gear was turn it into an experience, turn what was quite a dry magazine and dry program into a show. I remember more about the experiences and the places they were rather than the cars that they were reviewing. You may be familiar with this girl. This is Supercar Blondie. She is the world's most famous automotive journalist, believe it or not, with 60 million followers and growing. CEOs of car manufacturers are falling over themselves to fly supercars to Dubai so she can review them. Nike, 8.4 million followers. So if Nike want to sell tennis gear, they do a deal with Serena Williams, or basketball gear, LeBron James, or if it's football gear, Ronaldo, because he's got almost 100 million followers. And so the point being here is personality trumps brand. And I think it has done for years, and certainly within the B2B space, people buy from people. It's all about the relationship and their own personal brand. The question is, what do you want to be famous for? So for myself, one of the things I want to be famous for is digital selling, because I provide training for digital selling and social selling. And so I work quite hard at producing content that is about digital selling. And I do that a lot, many times a week. And so I'm now recognized as the 4th most influential person on Twitter for digital selling. But not only that, 9 of the top 10 most influential people for digital selling are all associates of this program. The key is, though, you must stand out. And if you're familiar with Gestalt thinking, we all have a 1 in 16 chance of being remembered. However, if we do make the effort to stand out and look different, we can influence that to 1 in 2. That's half the battle. And so, if we look at LinkedIn just for a moment, there are various titles, things that you can call yourself on LinkedIn: business development manager, sales manager, CEO. There are millions of them. So if you want to call yourself a thought leader because you think you'll stand out, there's still more than 100,000 of them. So we really need to avoid this and this. And so, short professional bio, interests, not yet provided. How likely are you to accept a connection request from this person? Not likely. We need to avoid this as well. This is an extreme example, but it still happens. No photo, no banner, very unlikely to want to connect with this individual. The question is, what do you want? So from a commercial perspective, this is what my clients tell me. They want visibility, recognition in the marketplace. They want credibility, or they want to be seen as a credible individual and earn that trusted advisor status as quickly as possible. They want recruitment opportunities, but they want to attract the top talent. They want the top talent to walk towards them rather than them chasing the top talent. And they want employee engagement and for their teams to feel that shared sense of purpose, being part of something special. And then finally, pipeline and revenue growth, and to create an inbound engine where, again, prospective clients and partners are walking towards them because they look interesting. They look like someone they should be working with. And Catherine Cole is a client of ours. Catherine and her leadership team have been through this program, And this is something they came up with as they thought about their organization being more social as they develop their social strategy. And so she says, a social organization sees social as a platform for closing the distance between clients, prospects, remote employees, and potential recruits. Now, the challenge is a lot of people, individuals, do social well, but not in a coordinated, structured way. And so when we really think about the strategy and the strategic imperatives that the organization is working towards, and the tactics that need to be followed, documenting the behaviors that each individual should follow on a daily and a weekly basis, that's when you really start to move mountains and achieve those more strategic KPIs like EBITDA, top line revenue growth, pipeline multiples, talent acquisition objectives. Challenge is most organizations are not thinking about social in this way. They're still thinking about social as social media marketing or social selling, but from a perspective of, well, we want to sell on social as opposed to developing personal brand, activating your network, and creating compelling content that enables you to stand out. So what do you need? Well, it's just that. You don't need a big budget. You need yourself and then a structured approach. And so for me, I thought I'd share my story with you. I'm certainly a good example of a small business owner that has been doing this since February, and I'm spending most of my time on 3 platforms, so LinkedIn, Guild, and Twitter, and I'm working hard at developing my personal brand. As Lisa mentioned earlier, I'm calling myself the MarTech growth guy, and I mainly work with MarTech companies or services organization within the MarTech ecosystem. Next is working hard at developing my network. So most of us build a network and have done over many years, but without any real strategy or purpose. And so I now have a strategy, and I'm now connecting with people on a daily basis as I work towards increasing the size of my network, but with the right companies, the companies that I am seeking to do business with. And so to give you an example of how easy this is to do, within an hour, I sent 103 connection requests. And after that hour, I've connected with 26 people. Now, typically, I'm seeing around a 40% connection acceptance rate on average over time. And if you are developing your personal brand and you're working on that, people that you're requesting connections from see you as an expert in your field. Next up is creating content. So most companies create content below the dotted line, the stuff that's easy to do, that maybe costs a little bit of money. They're creating corporate profiles, posting content to those profiles, and maybe getting some people within their organization to interact with that content. They're running campaigns and they're running advertising, all of which doesn't work anymore. Certainly, if we think about the primary objective here, which is generating conversations that ultimately you want to lead towards a commercial conversation. What does work, though, is the content above the dotted line. So advocating third-party insight or colleagues' content, sharing your own point of view, authoring your own content, writing blogs, articles, perhaps sharing the odd video here and there. But the real kind of magic starts to happen when you're humanizing that content, when you're helping your audience, your network, get to know you, as opposed to pushing your company. And I found that worked particularly well for me when I started doing it in March this year. So here's an example of my very first, human post. I was very proud of my eldest sons who have made it on the housing ladder earlier this year. And I thought, well, I'm going to write about that. And so, overwhelmed by the response, more than 235 pieces of engagement on this one post, almost 15,000 impressions. And when I analysed the data, I found there was more than 100 leads, 100 opportunities for me to reach out to people. In fact, every single person that had dropped a like on this post received a thank you from me. It created 25 new connection opportunities. I got into so many conversations. I ended up having 10 video calls, 5 pitches, 3 new opportunities. And as I say, there were 15,000 impressions of that content. And so what did I do? Well, I did more of it. And so here's a selection of some of the posts that I've done. Cheersing smoothies with my granddaughter, 100 pieces of engagement. Showing my tattoos in a business environment for the first time, something I was a little scared of, again, more than 100 pieces of engagement. My dog had a litter of puppies. And then at the bottom, sharing business experiences with my sons who work with me to get, 100, 156 pieces of engagement. And I don't do this all of the time, but the human posting, the human content forms part of my content strategy as I help my audience, my network, get to know me a little better. And the results speak for themselves. So I look at the outbound activities, so the things that I'm in control of, then the inbound, so what's the consequence of that outbound effort, and then the results. And so I've spent a fair amount of time tweeting. So 2,200 tweets since February. I've written 208 posts that I've shared on LinkedIn and Guild, 36 blogs. I think I'm up to 40 now. Again, I've shared those LinkedIn, Guild and Twitter. I've dropped more than 1,000 pieces of engagement on my target audience's content to encourage interaction. And I've connected with more than 3,000 new contacts in the last 12 months, an average of 58 per week. Now, that effort has resulted in 360,000 impressions of my content. That would probably cost you £20,000 for paid media. And this is more effective. 4,700 pieces of engagement on my content, giving me an opportunity to start a conversation, to thank that person for dropping a like or a comment. That's resulted in 156 conversations, on average 3 a week. And my business, as a result, has grown 122% in the last 12 months. 7 new clients and 3 renewals. And I'm just a one-man band when it comes to sales and marketing without a big budget. If we look at some of our clients who are typically larger than me, this is a really good example where they put 9 people through the program, combination of sales and product marketing, so some slightly technical people there, and nearly 500,000 impressions of content on their content within 5 months, 8,000 interactions that they could follow up on. The team had written 176 unique articles that were used within the pilot, and it generated £1.6 million worth of closed business within the 5-month period, 115 new business calls, and at the point of creating this slide, had £2 million worth of pipeline still open. Recruitment opportunities, so they hired someone off the back of the program. It wasn't a primary objective, but someone had noticed some cool stuff they were doing on social. And from an employee engagement perspective, the team really got behind it. They really felt like they were part of something special. And that's it. I'll pause for questions.
Wonderful, thank you.
Here we go.
Brilliant. So much information there. I have got some questions for you.
Okay.
So you talked at the start about that micro influencer. In terms of the organization, should that be led from the top, sort of like the CEO level? And how do you make sure that you get the right corporate messages coming out?
So I think the short answer is yes. So the more senior the individual within the organization, the better, because it really does, if you're leading from the front, leading by example, you're more likely to bring the organization with you as opposed to telling the organization what to do. The corporate message, corporate messaging, it's a tough one, right? Because some form of corporate messaging needs to be there. But at the end of the day, the stuff that works is the more humanized, thought leading messaging that comes from the individual. So I would always encourage that it comes from the individual, even if there needs to be a corporate flavor. Don't just repost the brochure, the corporate brochure, or the corporate article, unless you've got something interesting to say about it.
How do you then instill confidence within your team that you can say personal things about a particular corporate message?
Well, part of so it comes easier to some compared to others. Typically, what we see is 20% of people are ninjas. They're natural. They're quite happy to just go with it after the training. 20% find it very difficult, and in some cases refuse to do it because they don't think they should be personal at all on social media. But then there's 60% in the middle that, with the right coaching and confidence building within that coaching, can do it and will do it. But it often needs that ongoing, repetitive coaching, which is why the program that we provide is 12 weeks long and not just 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, you need to change the person and their mindset, don't you?
You do, and there's a the boundary's different for everyone. So what often comes up is, well, I'm not sharing anything personal on LinkedIn, and actually part of the discussion is saying, well, let's first define the difference between private and personal. They clearly don't share anything private, but where's your boundary for what might be personal? And one of my own team members wanted to write about an experience with their son, but they weren't comfortable including their face in the photo. So there was a photo of the back of their child. So they were still able to get the same point across, but within the boundaries of what they felt comfortable with.
Yeah, interesting. You talked about training there. Now, I thought I was pretty good with my social media and my social presence, but I've been working with you over the last 4 or 5 weeks now, and you've taught me so much. You've taught me that really, if somebody's liking my messages, I should be reaching out to them and talking to them. And I would never, ever have considered that. You also talked about at the start of your presentation about bringing in a new hire to maybe head all of this sort of stuff up. And you can see why that's important. But in terms of skills and training, what sort of things, other than what you've taught me that I know about, what sort of things are you teaching other people that you're working with? Without giving too much away, because they need to come on the training course, don't they?
Well, of course. There's quite a lot to it, right? So I did do an exercise where I listed all of the different behaviors that you can do, and I think there were 26 outbound behaviors. So there's never really a shortage of things that you can do on a weekly or even a daily basis if you think about it. I try and sort of just keep it simple, though. It really does boil down to 3 things. It's personal brand and developing that personal brand over time. So yes, from a passive perspective, how do I look if someone visits my profile? Do I stand out? do I look interesting enough for someone to carry on reading? And am I, through what I've written, am I leading them to reach the conclusion that I want them to reach? Now, doing that in a one-time exercise doesn't necessarily achieve those objectives, and so it does need to be a continuous thing.
Yeah.
The same with the content creation. So this is the active the active profile. What are the things that I'm doing or am I saying that will again achieve those same objectives? Ensure I stand out, look different, but ultimately help my audience that I'm targeting reach the conclusion that I want them to reach, which is, yes, I'm an expert in my field, but also I'm a nice person.
Yeah.
And here's a bit more about me. And that, again, that's an ongoing thing. And I find I've learned so much about myself doing that over the last 6, 7, 8 months.
Yeah, interesting. You talk again then about personal brand, and I'm all for promoting my own personal brand. Like you, I've got my own business, so I'm seen as the thought leader within my organization. But for a typical corporate organization out there, are they going to be a little bit concerned, and should they be concerned that their employees are upping their personal brand, increasing their followers, linking it with the corporate organization, and then perhaps going to leave and take those people with them? What would you say to those corporates that worry about things like that?
Well, I would say what choice have you got, right? So, I think most organizations are struggling at the moment to build pipeline, period. So you either continue to do what you've done before and it not work, right? Expect the same results, or do something different. And I think the fact is, people buy from people. So unless you are, unless you're helping your people develop the skills they need to help others buy from them, which is probably their MBOs, their commercial objectives anyway. Certainly for the revenue facing people within the organization. And if they're not doing it, someone else will.
Yeah.
And they'll be more successful somewhere else anyway.
Yeah, I know I've been in organisations where I've made an opinion, but been told off that I haven't quite kept to the corporate brand guidelines. This is a time where those corporate brand guidelines, need to be considered, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tough one. I worked for a very large American corporate for years, but we were still encouraged to develop our personal brands. I think what the bigger the organization, the more structure that you need around the industrialization of the approach, and I think the greater the need to have somebody that's dedicated to helping enable the approach.
Yeah.
And make it more efficient for the learners, the people going through the program.
Yeah.
And also start to take into account how you can centralize the curation of content to make it easier for people to then share that content and put their own spin on it within those guidelines. And then, that also, I think, touches on the measurement side of things. So I've shared some numbers that I've achieved. But as an organization, as you roll that out to bigger numbers, I think greater is the need to create dashboards so that everybody going through the program within the organization can see how they're performing.
Yeah. Make it a competition internally then.
Yeah.
I like
a competition. That. Yeah, I think, and a competition by measuring the right things. So it's easier to get hung up on measuring lag measures, the wrong things. But if you're measuring the things that the individual is in control of, then it's easier for them to know what they need to do to influence, where they are on the scoreboard.
Yeah, interesting.
If that
You, you,
makes
you,
sense.
you talked about building communities online. And building communities is something I would like to be famous for. I've got a track record in building lots of communities, be those customer forums, user groups, membership groups, all of those sorts of things. And you clearly see when you build those communities online, not only do you get those people talking together, but they actually champion the cause, don't they? And they're doing the selling of a product for you, I guess. Have you got any examples of those that you're able to share?
I think the example I shared earlier about that sort of that sense of that shared sense of purpose
And
and
belonging.
belonging,
Yeah.
of seeing learners going through the program and feeling quite excited about being part of something special in a very structured environment, which is why I think for me, having sort of come at this from a social influence perspective and then learn about the community side, the two are quite symbiotic.
Yeah.
And I think the value that I bring to the table when it comes to community is being able to teach people how to be influential socially and comfortable being more social digitally, which is part of the problem in digital communities, as far as I see it, is you've got a small percentage of people that are quite, prepared to be quite vocal and active, but such a large percentage of people that are just too afraid.
The lurkers. The
The
lurkers in the
lurkers.
background. Yeah, we see those all the time. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, I loved your bit about making posts more human. But there are a lot of things that you certainly see on LinkedIn where you get the criticism, or LinkedIn's turning into the next Facebook. How human should you go, and how do you get the balance right?
Yeah, that is the number one challenge that I've found, teaching people this approach is that it's the number one thing they find most difficult to do, and you've just got to get started. You've got to do what you're comfortable with, and keep doing it, even if it's in a very safe area, but it's as human as you think you're comfortable going.
Yeah.
And then just keep doing it. When you see the response, that then gives you more confidence to try something more. So I would say, just do it. Just do it and give it a go.
And obviously, when you go into a room, into a networking room, this is what we're looking to do in a digital environment. And when you go into that huge networking room and there are hundreds of people in there, sometimes you might get that imposter syndrome. I think that definitely exists when you try and connect with people online. I was certainly afraid to connect with somebody and send them a personal message. I'm doing that now because that's the advice you've given me. And my connecting has increased significantly. So, what would you say to people that are worried about that approach?
Yeah, well, you raise a good point, actually. So social uh, is no different. So social media, digital social, is no different to physical social. So if you think about how you would act or behave in a real life networking environment, it's very similar. There's a very close comparison to social media. So, for example, you wouldn't stand in a room and eyeball your potential customer and throw a brochure at them, but people do that on social media, thinking it's okay, or run up to them and start pitching to them in person. You would open up a conversation. Perhaps you've done a little bit of research on them, and you would typically start the conversation about yourself, or if you've learned something about them on their social profile, whether they've got kids or they've got hobbies, you'd start the conversation there. Exactly the same for social media. You know, you're starting it off, you're starting the conversation as an individual, getting to know someone, rather than pitching at them.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Now, I could talk to you for another hour, but I won't. So I was wondering if we could end by your top sort of tips on how people can get started.
Yeah, so
You're going to share another slide with us.
I think so. Just bear with me. So yeah, I thought I'd share some practical actions for people to take away. And so the first thing you can do is think about rewriting your profile, but focusing on you as an individual, not the company you work for or what you do. Connect to new people on a daily basis. So just have a think about, you know, the companies that you want to target and the people within those companies, and make a list. Send a few connection requests each day for at least a week and see what happens. Start to like and comment on the people that you're targeting on their posts. And if they're not posting, look at what they are, who they are interacting with. Maybe there's some influencers that they follow and they like their content. If you drop a like or a comment on that same post, you become more visible to the person that you're targeting. Publish content every day. Create something that gives somebody a reason to engage with you, or as a minimum, gives them something more about you to help them get to know you better, even though you haven't had a conversation with them. And finally, don't sell. No selling. The minute you start selling, the minute you push them into the zone of resistance, and you get nowhere.
I like those. They're brilliant. Thank you, Alex. I'm going to rewrite my profile focusing on me, because I know I talk about companies. So yes, I will be doing that myself when we're done. Alex, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to make this session available on demand so people can watch at their own pace. And Alex, if people want to contact you directly, LinkedIn is the best place to go?
It is. LinkedIn, Twitter,
Guild.
or Guild.
Yeah.
Yeah. All my contact details are there on all three.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And we'll talk again soon.
Thanks, Lisa.